Folks, welcome back to the Andy Sells Atlanta Real Estate Minute. I'm joined here today with John Fortener with Success Mortgage Partners. He's got 22 years of experience and is a certified mortgage advisor. And we're going to get into some questions today about what the settlement statement is all about. John, why don't you sort of elaborate what I mean by a settlement statement?
Well, the settlement statement, Andy, is also known as the HUD-1, and HUD is the acronym for Housing and Urban Development, and it's the most important document because it's the closing settlement fees that someone receives at the closing tables, hence the name HUD-1. But it's basically just a breakdown of all the closing costs that should mirror the good faith estimate that borrowers receive when they make their application.
Very well. Now, since it is such a significant part of the closing, actually, when should a buyer or a seller actually see that statement?
Well, ideally, Andy, 1 to 2 days before the closing is what we strive for. Depending on circumstances and situations, a lot of times when you get stuff early, people want to move the closing up, so it could be, but the goal is 1 to 2 days before closing.
Okay, well that's reasonable then too. Now, one thing I do get asked quite a bit is, Andy, as we're going to closing, what are the loan origination fees? Can you sort of elaborate on that?
Right, and as I said, the HUD-1 mimics the good faith estimate, and there's loan origination charges, and the charges are made up of a loan origination fee and then bank or lender fees. For example, that would be the underwriting fee, a processing fee, a doc prep fee, and the loan origination fee. Now these are the charges that the lender charges to cover the overhead, basically, of underwriting and processing and handling the paperwork, and then also the compensation for the loan officer and or the lender.
Sure, yeah.
So those are all bundled together, and that's in the first section on the top of the HUD.
Okay, very well. I appreciate you sort of elaborating on that. Now, the next question I had for you is title service fees and lender title insurance. You have so many different line items in the HUD statement that it sometimes gets confusing. Would you mind?
It is very confusing, and they confused it a few years ago by bundling all that together so that it is itemized on the back page, but most folks don't get to the back page. But basically you have, with the title services, that essentially in the state of Georgia anyway, is attorney's fees and or charges. You composed of the attorney's cost, but also the title examination, the title search, and maybe any title binders. So that's all bundled together. And then there's title insurance. And in Georgia, there are two types of title insurance: owner's title and lender's title. Now, lender's title is required by the state of Georgia, so that's included in the title service fees.
So a buyer will always have to pay that, or the seller?
That is always a closing cost. Now, then you make a good point. If the seller is paying closing costs, then that would be covered under closing costs. Now, the owner's portion of title insurance is an option in the state of Georgia. And what that covers is the equity that the borrower has when they are buying a house. For example, if they put 20% down, then they would have 20% equity. And as the house grows, it's a one-time charge. As the house appreciates in value, then their equity would increase. And so that one-time insurance payment would cover that equity for the life that they own the house. But it's not required in the state of Georgia, just the lender. And the lender's portion, of course, insures the loan amount.
But it certainly is a wise investment for a buyer.
It is. I could give a personal story regarding it, but it's just like any other insurance. You hope you never have to use it, but it's a one-time use or one-time fee that would pay for itself if you ever had to use it.
Yeah. And of course, this is an Uncle Sam question. Once you go to closing, you fill up the HUD statement. What are the government recording charges? Well, everybody always asks me about that.
This is at the bottom of the second page of the HUD, and yes, they have to pay for a certain number. Government has to get their piece. But first of all, you got to record the document. The security deed and warranty deed has to be recorded at the county courthouse, and they charge on a per page basis. So based on this number of pages on the security deed and a warranty deed, you're looking at about $50 to $60. So that's the recording cost. Then you have what's called state intangible tax. A mortgage is not a tangible item; it is an intangible item, and the state gets an amount for every mortgage in the state. That's basically a fee producer for the state, as is the transfer tax. Now, the county does get a portion of the transfer tax, but that is also a state fee, and that is to pay for the transfer of the title from seller into buyer's name. And again, right now the buyer for the most part is paying that, but if sellers are paying closing costs or majority of closing costs, that would be covered in under the closing costs as well.
Another thing that my clients often ask me is, what is GRMA? What is that acronym? What does it stand for?
A few years ago, when the licensing and the registration came into effect with the Dodd-Frank, etc., the SAFE Act, they established the Georgia Residential Mortgage Act fee, and it's just a $10 fee that's on every mortgage. You could call it as tax, but essentially it pays for the licensing and overseeing the licensing of my state license, of all lenders' state license.
John, I really appreciate you coming in today, elaborating
pleasure.
on the settlement statement too. That was wonderful. I hope to invite you back more often and maybe handle some other topics as well.
Be happy to do it.
In the meantime, folks, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me at andysellsatlanta@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, andysellsatlanta.com. Or if you'd like to talk to me on the phone, my cell phone number is 678-672-9956. Have a great day. See you next time. I do have one more question too. There's a new Gwinnett County redemption tax on light bulbs over 40 watts for any room bigger than 100 square foot in size. Who's responsible for that tax, and how does it get calculated?
As we leave the bedroom.